You know that feeling when the ground just shifts beneath you. Everything familiar disappears and suddenly you're facing, well, something terrifyingly unknown. We've all felt echoes of that, maybe with bad news or just feeling lost in too much information, needing some clarity.
Yeah, that sense of being overwhelmed.
Exactly. Well, today on the Deep Dive, we're taking that feeling and amplifying it, looking at an almost unimaginable extreme. We're diving into Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago.
A monumental work.
It really is. And our focus today is specific. The raw experience of arrest and imprisonment in the Soviet era. This isn't about reciting history. It's about understanding the human condition under that kind of intense pressure.
And the scope of the material we're looking at, it's vast. It stretches from the very early Soviet years, the Red Terror period.
Right, the political repression campaign.
Precisely. All the way through the Stalinist purges, and even beyond Stalin's death. These parts of the book really capture the randomness of the arrest, the brutality of prison and exile, but also, remarkably, the resistance of the human spirit.
And the scale. We're talking millions affected, right?
Millions. It's staggering.
So our mission here is to really pull out the key insights. How did people get swept into this gulag system? What was that immediate shock like, the aftermath?
And the psychological impact, which was immense.
Yeah, we want that deeper gut-level understanding, something more than just facts and dates. Okay, so let's get into it. Starting with the arrest itself, that knock on the door moment, or maybe not always a knock.
That's one of the striking things, actually. It wasn't always the midnight raid you might picture. People were picked up anywhere, anytime.
Like in public.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
At work, just walking down the street, having their papers checked, even in hospitals. Solzhenitsyn mentions people taken from hospital beds, sometimes with raging fevers.
Wow. From a place you'd think was safe.
Exactly. And that unpredictability was key, wasn't it? It created this constant low-level hum of anxiety. Everyone felt vulnerable all the time. It broke down trust much more effectively than just predictable nighttime arrests could.
It's twisted, but you mentioned some people actually felt relief when they were finally arrested. How does that even work?
It speaks volumes about the psychological torment, During the big waves of arrests, the waiting, the anticipation, the knowing it was probably coming, it became unbearable for some.
Just the sheer dread.
Exactly. Solzhenitsyn gives examples, like a school teacher, Serdikova. She was just relieved when they finally came for her. And Vasily Vlasov, a loyal communist, he apparently got depressed because everyone else was being arrested, but not him yet.
That's incredible. The waiting was worse than the event itself.
For them, yes. The finality, however awful, ended the agonizing uncertainty. And Father Irakli, a priest hidden by parishioners for years, when he was caught in 1942, he reportedly sang hymns. Just utterly worn out from hiding.
A grim kind of relief. And if the arrest did happen at home, it wasn't just about taking the person away, was it? It was invasive.
Oh, profoundly so. It was a performance of power. Solzhenitsyn describes agents just tearing through homes, emptying everything, trampling belongings. Nothing was sacred.
You mentioned something truly awful about a child.
Yes, the story of Anoshin, the engineer. His child had just died, was lying in a coffin in the home. The agents dumped the body out to search the coffin.
Unbelievable.
They'd pull sick people from beds, unwind bandages, looking for anything. It was complete dehumanization. Imagine the trauma for the family left behind watching that.
And all this time, the official line was denial. People just vanished, like sometimes publicly, and the state said, nope, didn't happen.
Precisely. The TA's statement about Alexander Dolgun's disappearance is a chilling case study in this, just outright denial. Solzhenitsyn even notes similar things happening abroad, like in Brussels. It shows the reach, the audacity.
Creating that climate of fear you mentioned. You couldn't even trust your own eyes.
Exactly. And these arrests, they weren't random acts of terror, were they? There was a strategy. Silencing opposition.
Right, targeting specific groups.
Systematically. Solzhenitsyn lays it out. First, non-Bolsheviks, religious figures, intellectuals, but then it widened hugely.
Who else?
Entire jazz orchestras, if you can believe it. Specific nationalities, Volga Germans, Czechs, West Ukrainians, Poles, people from the Baltics, Moldavia. The poet Tanya Koltkovich arrested for her verses.
Just for writing poetry?
Anything seen as potentially deviating. It atomized society, broke connections, stamped out potential resistance before it could even start.
And it wasn't just politics or ideas, just surviving could get you arrested.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that 7/8 law.
Ah, yes. Utterly absurd and brutal. People got 10-year sentences for taking practically nothing. A few stalks of grain from a field, a cucumber, a scrap of wood.
10 years. for a cucumber.
10 years. And later, Stalin apparently thought even that was too lenient, inadequate. It shows the sheer cruelty, the arbitrary nature of it all. It wasn't about the grain, it was about terrorizing people into absolute submission, total control.
So you're arrested, maybe for nothing, your home is violated, you're facing years in prison, then comes the interrogation, designed to break you.
And what's deeply disturbing is how openly torture was discussed, even justified, in the early days. Solzhenitsyn points to official publications like The Red Sword, debating its use from a Marxist viewpoint.
So it wasn't some secret rogue thing.
It seems it was being theorized, maybe normalized, as a state tool right from the start.
And the methods got worse over time, especially during the big purges.
Yes, definitely a shift around 1937, 1938. Before then, there was maybe a thin veil of procedure, like needing permission on paper to torture.
Permission they probably got easily.
Likely, yes. But during the mass arrest kulaks, targeted nationalities, the sheer numbers, the quotas they had to meet, it just exploded. Interrogators basically got a free hand. Any method, no matter how cruel, seemed okay to get confessions.
And beyond the physical stuff, there were psychological games too, weren't there?
Oh, highly sophisticated and manipulative tactics, designed to destroy your will, your reason.
Like what?
Well, there was logical persuasion, trying to convince you confessing lies was somehow good for the party. Twisted logic. Then psychological contrast, the interrogator being friendly one minute, terrifying the next. Classic good cop, bad cop.
Keep you off balance.
Exactly. And preliminary humiliation, making prisoners lie face down for hours, stripping them naked for fake medical exams. Deliberate degradation to break their spirit.
The exploitation of family ties sounds particularly horrific.
It was vile. Pressuring relatives to lie by threatening the prisoner, or tricking relatives into signing false confessions, saying it would save their loved one.
But the total betrayal of trust.
And Solzhenitsyn contrasts this sharply with Tsarist law, which actually protected family members from having to testify against each other. They'd also use your love for family as direct leverage against you.
Anything to break you.
And sleep deprivation. That was a standard tool. Brutally effective. Sometimes they'd put you on a soft sofa, making you desperate for sleep, then have a guard kick you awake constantly for days. It shatters you mentally.
It's chilling. No amount of education or character could really prepare you for that, could it? As Solzhenitsyn wrote, we're trained for so much, but not for this.
It just highlights the absolute powerlessness of the individual against that machine. So, okay, the interrogation is done. Next stop.
Yeah.
The prison itself. A whole new level of hell.
The overcrowding must have been insane.
So the descriptions are just staggering. But Turkey prison, 1918, during the Red Terror, they had 70 women crammed into a laundry room cell.
In a laundry room?
Yeah. Ivanov Razumnik calculated that in Lubyanka's reception area, it sometimes reached 3 people per square yard. Think about that. 3 people. 1 square yard. And even decades later, 1948, Vladimir's Central Prison, 30 people in a single cell.
Just the physical proximity, the lack of air.
Dehumanizing in itself. And faced with this, some prisoners found ways to cope, didn't they? To hold on to some inner strength.
What did Solzhenitsyn suggest?
A key piece of advice was to mentally cut ties with your old life. Just declare it over in your mind. Focus only on the present, on preserving your inner self, your conscience. That detachment gave strength.
But inside the prison, new power dynamics emerged. More abuse.
Oh, absolutely. Even low-ranking guards got drunk on their little bit of power. Solzhenitsyn mentions one officer, Senchenko, just casually using things he'd confiscated from prisoners. A sense of entitlement, like they deserved war booty.
How did this square with the Soviet ideal they were supposed to be building?
Well, there was a huge disconnect, wasn't there? Widespread denial or maybe willful ignorance in the rest of society. People not directly affected just couldn't or wouldn't grasp the horror. Young people after the revolution genuinely believed in this bright future, even as people vanished around them.
What about religion? How was faith viewed inside? Did it change?
Initially, believers were prime targets for persecution, but later, Solzhenitsyn notes a sort of paradoxical shift. Some started arguing that religious folk were inherently honest, hard workers, maybe useful to the state in some way.
Useful, a cynical view.
Very pragmatic, very cynical, adapting based on perceived utility.
So you arrive at the prison. That initial shock must have been profound.
Completely disorienting. Solzhenitsyn writes about the impossibility of even counting the cells and the impact of seeing others in that first cell sharing the same fate. He compares its intensity to first love. Unforgettable.
But even getting to that first cell could be brutal.
Yes, often held in pits, tiny boxes, damp cellars first, isolation, neglect, before even reaching the relative community of a cell.
Yet even then, people resisted, found ways to hold on.
Small acts, but hugely significant. The prisoner measuring things with thread, inventing ways to sleep standing up, secret writing on prayer beads, developing that spiritual sensor to know who to trust in an atmosphere thick with betrayal.
It's also mentioned that older networks, from Tsarist times, were destroyed.
Deliberately, erasing that collective memory of resistance. And then there's the tragedy of the Soviet POWs returning after World War II.
Treated as heroes.
No, treated as potential traitors. Deep suspicion. Many ended up right back in the Gulag. Solzhenitsyn also describes the Allies betraying anti-communist Russians, sending them back to face imprisonment or death, and Russians who fought in German uniforms, often out of desperation, nowhere to go. Complex tragedies.
And the sentencing itself, completely arbitrary, no real justice.
Utterly. A major dismissing appeals out of hand. Georgi Tenno's dark joke about a 25-year sentence being like a soap ration. It shows the total disregard for human life. And even before formal sentences, early on, mass executions without trial, sinking barges full of prisoners during the Civil War.
Horrifying. He uses the term turzak, prison confinement.
Yes, it became an official term. And he notes how quickly the new Soviet state realized it needed prisons, even while preaching utopia. By December 1917, prisons were essential.
Did prisoners try to protest? Like hunger strikes?
They did, but it was suppressed, especially by the 1930s, though he highlights Yekaterina Ulitskaya's 19-day fast, which actually won some minor concessions, shows that even extreme resistance wasn't always futile, at least temporarily.
And contact with the outside world. Severely limited, I assume?
Extremely. Letters forbidden or heavily censored. Sometimes you had to return a letter the day after reading it. Total isolation was a key control tactic.
In that isolation, how did people survive spiritually?
Solzhenitsyn explores different views. Could it purify you or just destroy you? He mentions the astronomer Nikolai Kozyrev finding strength by thinking about the cosmos, something vast beyond the prison walls.
Even basic things like hot water were used against them.
Petty theft by guards, deliberately withholding necessities. Solzhenitsyn suggests shortages were often manipulated, not accidental, another layer of control and misery.
Then came the transport to the camps. The journey itself.
The red trains, a horrific symbol, transporting millions dispossessed peasants, city populations, those destined for Kolyma, packed into cattle cars, brutal conditions.
And stripped of everything they had left.
Yes, brutal searches during transit, confiscating meager belongings, constant humiliation.
Arrival at the camps. Was it any better?
Often worse. Early camps took over monasteries, just threw the monks out. Starvation rations were standard, and yet bizarrely you'd have things like drama clubs alongside constant fear of denunciation.
Staged events, too, like visits for propaganda.
Absolutely. Gorky's visit to Solovki is a famous example, a complete Potemkin village setup, and the story of the brave boy who whispered the truth to him, exposing the lies, shows the regime's need to mask the reality.
And the system just grew and grew.
Exponentially. Solovki expanded, other camps sprang up, prisoner labor became a commodity sold to industries, a whole hierarchical archipelago emerged. Solzhenitsyn debunks the myth that one man, Frankel, invented it. Forced labor camps existed from 1918.
He even used writers for propaganda.
Yes, the stage trip for writers to the Belomor Canal Project, resulting in that infamous propaganda book, cementing the Gulag's role in the Soviet narrative.
Some camps were known for being exceptionally brutal.
Kolyma, the pole of cold and cruelty. Descriptions of starvation, forced labor, and temperatures so low fires weren't allowed, people too weak being dragged or left to die. It's almost unimaginable.
World War II made things even worse for prisoners.
Definitely. Releases for politicals, Article 58 stopped immediately. Some already released were even brought back. The war was an excuse to keep the forced labor pool full. Solzhenitsyn argues the Gulag wasn't marginal. It was central, the liver of events, essential for the economy and ideology.
The work itself. What kind of labor are we talking about?
Brutal, back-breaking stuff. 10-hour logging shifts after long marches in the freezing cold, grubbing tree stumps from frozen ground, hauling ore in Kolyma, relentless, exhausting, often pointless labor.
And yet, prisoners felt
innocent.
Universally so,
Yeah.
Solzhenitsyn says. A shared sense of unjust suffering. He compares it to the Tatar yoke. But paradoxically, some found a strange wisdom in that suffering.
Wisdom, what kind?
That's the profound question he asks. What do you do with wisdom gained through such horror? He shows people like Tarashkovich who wouldn't compromise their integrity, even facing death. He considers the potential for rebirth, like Dostoevsky, but also the danger of your conscience just dying from deprivation.
He mentions a strange kind of freedom, too. Yes, the mountain air, freedom from endless mandatory political meetings, an unexpected space for internal thought, ironically found within the camp walls.
This idea of the result is what counts.
Yeah.
It seems to permeate everything.
Hugely corrosive to morality. Ends justify the means. It bred massive corruption in the camps. But still, individuals like Grigory Ivanovich held on to their honesty.
And the effects reached beyond the camps.
Yeah.
Into society.
The language, the mentality it seeped out, a loss of peace of mind for everyone, restrictions on movement. The prison infected the whole country.
So arrest wasn't just random bad luck. It was targeted.
Solzhenitsyn argues it was a fixed lottery. It hit the bold, the dissenting, disproportionately, leading to a society of conformity, of fear, and pervasive lying became a survival mechanism.
Even during the war under German occupation, the paranoia continued.
Yes, accusing people of collaboration just for keeping basic services running, utterly illogical cruelty. And the mass graves found in Vinnytsia, proof of Soviet massacres before the Germans arrived. He also notes some opposed the Soviets not out of personal loss, but deeper principle.
Did prisoners ever fight back? Collectively?
Yes, there were protests, strikes, uprisings, always brutally suppressed, like in Kengirs. The authorities even manipulated criminal prisoners against the politicals, fleeting moments of freedom during uprisings, then crush.
Kengir sounds like a major example.
It is. Solzhenitsyn details it. The shooting that sparked it, the mass refusal to work, generals arriving, temporary concessions, the authorities playing games, and then the final assault. Tanks against unarmed prisoners.
Yeah.
Sheer brutality.
And besides the camps, there was exile. Different, but still repression.
Yes. Initially not for permanent settlement, just a holding pen. Solzhenitsyn argues Soviet exile was often harsher than historical ones, like Ovid's. Think of the dekulakization of 15 million peasants uprooted, rural life shattered. A peasant plague.
Churches used to house them.
Yes, and entire nations deported wholesale on charges of treachery. Swift military operations, no warning. Brutal.
What about release? Was it the end of the ordeal?
Often not. Prisoners dreamed of it, naturally, but the reality could be devastating, a punishing transition. Feeling like years were stolen, wanting isolation, the physical and psychological scars ran deep. Some felt it was just another kind of death sentence.
After Stalin, did things change? Did the truth come out?
Slowly, partially, incompletely. Things like one day in the life of Ivan Denisovich had a huge impact, forced some acknowledgement, but there was massive resistance to real change from within the system.
So the brutality didn't just vanish?
Not at all. The Novocherkassk massacre in '62, where protesting workers were shot. Continued persecution of religious groups like Baptists in the '60s. The underlying methods persisted. Solzhenitsyn saw his work as a warning, especially to Western intellectuals who might romanticize such regimes.
He clearly felt a powerful obligation to tell these stories.
Immense. All the letters he got from former prisoners, the danger he faced writing and hiding the manuscript, it was a profound moral duty to bear witness.
Listening to all this, this deep dive into the archipelago, it's about so much more than just documenting repression, isn't it?
Absolutely. It lays bare the extremes of human vulnerability, yes, but also incredible resilience. The spirit fighting back against systematic dehumanization.
And remembering, it isn't just history. It feels vital. Understanding the cost of unchecked power, how fragile freedom really is, these lessons feel very current.
They absolutely are.
For everyone listening, maybe hoping for some clarity in a complex world, we hope this exploration has offered some framework, some insight beyond just the surface level of events.
And maybe a final thought to leave with. Think about the stories not fully told. Within those millions, countless individual acts of courage, of kindness, moments of humanity flickering in the darkness. What's our responsibility now to keep seeking those stories, to remember the individuals so that sacrifice, that suffering, and those lessons aren't lost?